He sat there like a king on a throne, his charcoal brioni suit worth more than most people's yearly salary, sharing whispered jokes with his army of legal mercenaries. Walter Mazzanti thought the divorce was already in the bag. He thought freezing every account with Carmel's name on it meant she'd have no choice but to surrender. He even had the audacity to tell the courtroom she was unfit to manage her own affairs. But Walter made one catastrophic miscalculation about Carmel's family, specifically about the quiet woman from Florida who used to bake cookies at school fundraisers. When those courtroom doors burst open and Rita Rogers strode in wearing an emerald suit that meant business, the arrogant grin didn't just disappear from Walter's face. Every drop of blood drained from his body as recognition hit him like a freight train. You were about to witness a Mafia boss get demolished in open court. The air inside Courtroom 7B of the New York Supreme Court building hung heavy and oppressive, carrying the faint scent of furniture polish and decades of broken promises. It was the kind of atmosphere that signaled the end of things. But for Walter Mazzanti, the room practically smelled like champagne and victory cigars. Walter straightened the Windsor knot of his silk tie, the fabric imported from a boutique in Milan that didn't even have a sign on the door. Sprawled comfortably in the plaintiff's chair, he glanced at his Patek Philippe watch, a timepiece worth more than the average Brooklyn townhouse, and released a contemptuous snort through his perfectly straight nose. "She's not even putting up a fight," Walter muttered to the man seated beside him, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "I told you this would be easy, Vincent. Like taking candy from a baby who never learned to throw a punch." Vincent Calabrese wasn't just any lawyer. He was a predator in pinstripes. Managing partner at Calabrese and Associates, he built his reputation demolishing opposing counsel in some of the most vicious family court battles Manhattan had ever seen. They called him the Undertaker in legal circles because he didn't just win cases, he buried his opponents so deep they never recovered. Vincent adjusted his platinum cufflinks, his cold eyes scanning the courtroom with the bored efficiency of a shark circling wounded prey. "Doesn't matter if she shows up with a prayer and a cardboard sign, Walter," Vincent said, his voice smooth as aged bourbon, but twice as lethal. "We executed the asset freeze Thursday morning. Every account, every credit card, every line of credit with her name attached. No money means no attorney. No attorney against me means she'll be lucky to walk out with her wedding ring and a bus pass." Walter's lips curled into a predatory smile as his gaze slid across the center aisle. Sitting there in painful isolation was Carmel. She looked diminished, smaller than he'd ever seen her. She wore a navy blue dress she'd purchased at least 5 years ago, nothing designer, nothing that spoke of the Mazzanti wealth. Her hands rested on the scarred wooden table before her, fingers interlocked so tightly her knuckles had gone bone white. There were no legal briefs stacked in front of her, no assistants furiously taking notes, no glass of water, just Carmel, staring straight ahead at the empty judge's bench with the hollow expression of someone already defeated. "Look at her over there," Walter said, his voice loud enough that the handful of observers in the gallery could hear every mocking syllable. "This is just sad at this point. It's like watching a lamb waiting at the slaughterhouse door, already accepting what's coming." "Keep it together," Vincent cautioned, though the corner of his mouth twitched upward in amusement. "Judge Morrison doesn't tolerate theatrics. Let's handle this professionally and get you out of here. I've got a meeting with the Castellano family attorney at 2. "Trust me, Vincent," Walter replied, leaning back with the confidence of a man who'd never lost anything in his life. "By 2 o'clock, I'll be a free man, and she'll be figuring out which of her relatives will let her sleep on their couch." The bailiff, a stocky woman named Officer Patricia Delgado, who'd witnessed enough family court carnage to lose her faith in matrimony 3 times over, called out in a voice that echoed off the wood-paneled walls, "All rise." The Honorable Judge Margaret Morrison presiding. The courtroom shuffled to its feet with the sound of expensive shoes on marble and cheap chairs scraping against tile. Judge Morrison entered like a storm front, her black robes flowing behind her. She was a woman of steel-gray hair, razor-sharp cheekbones, and a reputation for suffering no fools. She'd cleared more divorce dockets than any judge in the Southern District, and she did it with surgical precision. She took her seat with practiced efficiency, adjusted her reading glasses, and fixed her penetrating stare on the parties before her. "Be seated," Judge Morrison ordered, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The room obeyed. She opened the thick manila folder before her, reading the tab with the kind of weary recognition that came from seeing too many marriages end badly. Case number 2025, D. 4782. Mazzanti versus Mazzanti. We are here for the preliminary hearing regarding asset division, custody arrangements, and the petition for emergency spousal support. Judge Morrison's eyes shifted to the plaintiff's table, where Walter sat like he owned the place. "Mr. Calabrese," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "I see you're representing Mr. Mazzanti. I assume you're prepared to proceed?" "Absolutely, Your Honor," Vincent said, rising with the fluid grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. "We are ready, willing, and eager to move forward." The judge's gaze moved deliberately to the defense table. Her expression shifted from professional neutrality to something resembling concern. She studied Carmel sitting there alone, without a single piece of paper, without a single ally visible to the naked eye. "Mrs. Mazzanti," Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying a note of warning, "I see you appear to be unrepresented today. I must inform you that proceeding without legal counsel in a case of this complexity is highly inadvisable. Do you have an attorney, or are you seeking a continuance to secure representation?" Carmel opened her mouth to speak, but before a single syllable could escape, Vincent was on his feet. "Your Honor, if I may," Vincent interjected, his voice oozing false concern. "My client has been more than patient. Mrs. Mazzanti has had ample time to secure counsel. The unfortunate reality is that her inability to do so speaks to a larger pattern of financial irresponsibility and poor decision-making. We would ask the court to proceed as scheduled. Every day of delay costs my client emotionally and financially." Walter leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest, his expression one of absolute triumph. He'd won before the hearing even started. Judge Morrison frowned, clearly uncomfortable but bound by procedure. "Mrs. Mazzanti, I'll ask you directly. Do you have legal representation, or do you wish to request a continuance?" Carmel's lips parted. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Your Honor, I—" That's when it happened. The heavy oak double doors at the rear of the courtroom exploded open with a sound like thunder. Every head in the room whipped around. Standing in the doorway, backlit by the fluorescent lights of the corridor, was a woman in a sharply tailored emerald green suit. She was in her late 60s, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant knot, and she carried a leather briefcase that looked like it had seen more courtrooms than most judges. Behind her stood two younger attorneys, a man and a woman, both carrying file boxes that appeared heavy with evidence. The woman strode down the center aisle with a kind of confidence that could only come from decades of commanding rooms far more hostile than this one. Walter's smirk evaporated. His face went from ruddy confidence to sickly pale in the span of a single heartbeat. He knew that walk. He knew that face. "Your Honor," the woman announced, her voice cutting through the stunned silence like a prosecutorial blade, "I apologize for the dramatic entrance. Rita Rogers, attorney at law, formerly senior deputy chief of the Criminal Division, United States Department of Justice. I am here to represent my daughter, Carmel Mazzanti, in these proceedings." Vincent Calabrese, for the first time in his career, looked like he'd swallowed broken glass. Walter Mazzanti looked like he'd just seen his own ghost. And Carmel, for the first time in months, allowed herself the smallest, most dangerous smile. Before we dive into this explosive courtroom battle, if you're loving this story of justice and revenge, smash that like button and drop a comment below telling me what you think is going to happen next. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the moment when Walter Mazzoni gets exactly what he deserves. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming. Now, let's get into it. 20 minutes earlier, before Rita Rogers's thunderous entrance, the courtroom had been Walter Mazzoni's personal kingdom. He sat at the plaintiff's table like a don holding court, one arm draped casually over the back of his chair, the other gesturing expansively as he spoke to Vincent Calabrese. His voice carried across the nearly empty gallery with the confidence of a man who'd never faced real consequences. "You know what I love about this, Vincent?" Walter said, his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "The symmetry of it all. She thought marrying me would give her security, protection, a life she could never have dreamed of. Now she's about to learn what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you." Vincent allowed himself a thin smile as he organized his files with meticulous precision. Each document represented another nail in Carmel's legal coffin. "You've executed this perfectly, Walter. The asset freeze was just the opening move. We've contacted every major family law firm in Manhattan, dropped your name, made it clear that representing Carmel Mazzoni would be professionally unwise." "Professional suicide is more like it," Walter corrected, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "I've got judges, cops, businessmen, half the city in my pocket. No legitimate attorney is going to risk their career, their reputation, maybe even their kneecaps, to defend her. She's radioactive." Vincent nodded, his expression betraying nothing but cold calculation. 14 firms declined her calls. 3 wouldn't even return her messages. The freeze on the joint accounts means she can't afford a retainer even if she found someone desperate enough to take the case. She's boxed in on all sides. Walter's grin widened into something predatory and ugly. "That's what she gets for thinking she could leave me. For thinking she had options. Women like Carmel don't leave men like me. They endure, they obey, or they disappear. But they don't walk away. Look at her," Walter continued, loud enough that Carmel could probably hear every word he wanted her to hear. "Sitting there like she's already at her own funeral. No lawyer, no money, no options. This hearing is just a formality. By the time we're done, she'll be grateful I'm letting her keep anything at all." Vincent glanced across at Carmel, assessing her like a predator evaluating prey. "She looks defeated already." "Good. The faster this goes, the cleaner it is." "Clean?" Walter laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Vincent, I don't want clean. I want total annihilation. When this is over, I want every woman in the city to know what happens when you try to leave Walter Mazzoni. I want her to spend the rest of her life regretting the day she ever thought she deserved better than what I gave her." Officer Delgado shot them a warning glare from her position near the judge's bench, but Walter ignored her. He was untouchable. The rules that applied to ordinary men didn't apply to him. "The best part?" Walter whispered, leaning closer to Vincent. "Her mother. That pathetic little woman from Florida who thinks she's so righteous. I made sure she knows her daughter's getting destroyed today. I want her to feel helpless too. I want the whole Rogers family to understand that crossing me has consequences that last generations." Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then showed Walter the screen. It was a text from one of his paralegals, confirmed. "No representation filed for defendant. She's going in alone." Walter's smile could have cut glass. It's over before it even started. What Walter Mazzoni didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know in his arrogance and cruelty, was that his perfect plan had one fatal flaw. He'd underestimated exactly who Rita Rogers used to be. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. "Mrs. Mazzoni, I need an answer. Do you have representation, or are you requesting a continuance?" Carmel rose slowly from her chair, her legs unsteady beneath her. She could feel Walter's eyes boring into the back of her skull, could practically hear his silent laughter. Her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table for support. "Your Honor," Carmel began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I would like to request a continuance. I've been trying to secure legal counsel, but circumstances have made that difficult." "Difficult?" Vincent Calabrese erupted from his seat before Carmel could finish. Your Honor, with all due respect, what Mrs. Matsani calls difficult, the rest of us call accountability. She's had weeks to find representation. The fact that she hasn't isn't the court's problem. Judge Morrison held up a hand. Mr. Calabrese, I'll hear from Mrs. Matsani first. But Vincent was already in full attack mode, his voice rising with theatrical indignation. This is nothing but a delay tactic, Your Honor. Mrs. Matsani knows she has no case. The prenuptial agreement is ironclad. Her claims of financial abuse are baseless and borderline defamatory. She's simply stalling the inevitable because she can't accept reality. That's not true, Carmel protested, her voice gaining strength despite the tears threatening to spill. Every attorney I've contacted has refused my case. My accounts have been frozen. I can't even access the money I need for a retainer. Money she has no legal right to. Vincent interrupted, his finger jabbing the air for emphasis. Those accounts contain assets accumulated during the marriage, assets that are subject to division under the prenuptial agreement Mrs. Matsani signed willingly and with full knowledge of its terms. Walter sat back, arms crossed, watching his lawyer destroy his wife with the detached amusement of someone watching a nature documentary. This was entertainment. Judge Morrison's frown deepened. Mrs. Matsani, I'm sympathetic to your situation, but Mr. Calabrese raises valid points. This hearing was scheduled 3 weeks ago. The court cannot continue granting delays indefinitely. Your Honor, please. Carmel's voice cracked. I just need more time. 1 week. I have someone who might be able to. Someone who might? Vincent scoffed. Your Honor, we've heard this song before. Next week it will be another excuse, another delay. Mrs. Matsani is wasting the court's time and my client's resources. We move for an immediate ruling on asset division based on the prenuptial agreement and the documented pattern of financial mismanagement. I'm not mismanaging anything. Carmel's voice finally broke through, louder than she intended. Your client has terrorized every lawyer in this city. He's used his connections, his threats, his... Careful, Mrs. Matsani, Vincent warned, his voice silky smooth and deadly. Accusations of that nature require evidence, which you conveniently don't have. Or an attorney, which you also conveniently don't have. The courtroom fell silent except for the sound of Carmel's ragged breathing. Judge Morrison looked genuinely troubled, caught between compassion and procedure. Mrs. Matsani, the judge said gently, I cannot grant another continuance without evidence of good faith effort to secure counsel. I'm going to have to. The courtroom doors exploded open. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the courtroom. Every head turned as Rita Rogers strode down the center aisle with the purposeful gait of someone who had walked into far more dangerous rooms than this. She was 68 years old, but she moved like a general entering a battlefield she'd already won in her mind. The emerald suit she wore was perfectly tailored, speaking of power and precision. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe knot that somehow made her look more formidable, not less. Behind her, 2 younger attorneys struggled to keep pace, their arms loaded with file boxes. But it was Rita's eyes that commanded the room. They were sharp, calculating, and absolutely fearless. They swept across the courtroom, taking in every detail, before landing on Walter Matsani with the weight of a judge's gavel. Walter's face drained of color. His jaw went slack. The confident smirk that had been permanently etched on his features vanished like smoke in wind. No, he whispered, so quietly only Vincent could hear. No, that's not possible. Vincent looked confused, glancing between his client and the approaching woman. Walter, who is that? But Walter couldn't answer. His throat had gone completely dry. Rita reached the bar that separated the gallery from the counsel tables and set her briefcase down with a decisive thunk that might as well have been a declaration of war. Your Honor, Rita announced, her voice clear and commanding, carrying decades of courtroom authority. I apologize for the dramatic timing. My name is Rita Rogers. I'm here to represent the defendant, Carmel Matsani. Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose. Ms. Rogers, this is highly irregular. Are you admitted to practice in New York? I am, Your Honor. New York Bar number 1478823, admitted 1982. I've been retired from active practice, but my license has remained current. Rita opened her briefcase and produced a document. I've filed my notice of appearance electronically, and I have a hard copy for the court's records. One of her associates hurried forward to hand the document to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Morrison. The judge scanned it quickly, her expression shifting from skepticism to surprise. Ms. Rogers, this says you were formerly with the Department of Justice? Yes, Your Honor. I spent 32 years as a federal prosecutor. The last 15 as Senior Deputy Chief of the Criminal Division, specializing in organized crime and racketeering cases. The courtroom seemed to inhale collectively. Several spectators in the gallery leaned forward, suddenly far more interested. Vincent Calabrese's confident posture faltered for the first time. Your Honor, this is absurd. Ms. Rogers cannot simply waltz into these proceedings at the last possible moment. I'm not waltzing anywhere, Mr. Calabrese, Rita interrupted, her voice cutting through his objection like a razor. I'm entering my appearance on behalf of my daughter, which is my right under New York civil procedure. Unless you'd like to argue that a mother shouldn't be allowed to defend her own child. The word daughter hit the courtroom like a thunderclap. Carmel's eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't tears of despair. They were tears of relief, of hope, of seeing cavalry arrive when all seemed lost. Walter finally found his voice. You can't do this, he hissed across the aisle, loud enough for Rita to hear. You're retired. You've been out of the game for years. This is family court, not federal prosecution. Rita turned slowly to face him, and the look she gave Walter Mazzanti would have frozen hell itself. Mr. Mazzanti, she said, her voice quiet but laced with steel, I spent 3 decades putting men like you behind bars. Men who thought they were untouchable. Men who believed their money and connections made them immune to consequences. She paused, letting her words sink in. Every single one of them learned they were wrong. Would you like to know what they all had in common? Walter said nothing, but his hands had begun to tremble. They underestimated the people they hurt, Rita continued. They thought intimidation was the same as power. They mistook fear for respect. And when someone finally stood up to them, someone who knew exactly how their empires were built and exactly how to tear them down, they discovered something important. She took one step closer to the bar. They discovered that the higher you build your house of cards, the more spectacular it looks when it collapses. This courtroom battle is just heating up. If you're as fired up as I am watching Rita Rogers walk in like the avenging angel Carmel needed, hit that like button and tell me in the comments what you think Walter's face looked like when he saw his worst nightmare walk through that door. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters where Rita starts dismantling Walter's lies piece by piece. The destruction is about to get real. 28 years earlier in Brooklyn Federal Courthouse. Rita Rogers stood before a jury, a much younger woman with fire in her eyes and steel in her voice. Behind the defense table sat Michael the Hammer Torino, a captain in the Gambini crime family who controlled half the construction contracts in New York City. Ladies and gentlemen, Rita said, her voice clear and unwavering, Mr. Torino wants you to believe he's a legitimate businessman. That the 12 shell companies, the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, the cash transactions totaling $47 million, that all of this is simply aggressive but legal business practice. She picked up a thick binder, letting it drop on the prosecution table with a heavy thud. This is aggressive. This is methodical. But this is not legal. This is racketeering. This is money laundering. This is organized crime dressed in an expensive suit. The Hammer smirked at her, confident. His lawyer was the best money could buy. He had judges on his payroll, cops who looked the other way, witnesses who suddenly developed amnesia. But Rita had something none of them expected: patience, brilliance, and 6 years of building an airtight case brick by brick. When the jury returned with a guilty verdict on all counts, the Hammer's smirk finally died. He received 40 years. No parole. That night, Rita went home to her small apartment in Queens. 7-year-old Carmel was already asleep, watched over by Mrs. Chun from downstairs. Rita kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered, "Mommy's going to make the world safer for you, baby. One monster at a time." Over the next 3 decades, Rita would take down 16 major organized crime figures. The Castellano family, the Russos, the Vitalis. She became a legend in federal prosecution circles, the woman who couldn't be bought, threatened, or intimidated. But she kept it all from Carmel. The death threats, the bodyguards, the nights she came home with evidence of horrors no child should know existed. Rita wanted Carmel to have a normal life, to never know the darkness her mother swam through daily. When Rita finally retired to Florida, she thought those battles were behind her. She'd spend her golden years on the beach, playing with future grandchildren, enjoying peace. Then Carmel called, crying, saying she was leaving Walter, saying he'd threatened her, saying no lawyer would help. Rita had asked only one question: is he connected? Carmel's silence was answer enough. Rita began making calls that very night. Not to lawyers, to old colleagues, to FBI agents who still owed her favors, to forensic accountants who specialized in finding what powerful men tried to hide. She wasn't retired anymore. She was a mother protecting her child. And God help anyone who stood in her way. Back in the courtroom, Rita opened her briefcase with the calm precision of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. She withdrew a slim file folder, its contents organized with meticulous care. "Your Honor," Rita began, her voice steady and professional, "before we proceed with this hearing, I'd like to enter several exhibits into evidence that are directly relevant to the equitable distribution of marital assets." Judge Morrison nodded. "Proceed, Ms. Rogers." Exhibit A, Rita announced, handing copies to the bailiff for distribution. Bank statements for an account at Zurich International Banking, account number 847, KX, 9021, registered under the name MW Holdings LLC. An LLC of which my son-in-law, Walter Mazzani, is the sole beneficial owner. Walter's head snapped up. Vincent Calabrese froze mid-note. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular," Vincent protested, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "We haven't had time to review these documents." "You'll have time now," Rita said smoothly. Exhibit B, wire transfer records showing consistent monthly deposits to the Zurich account totaling approximately $2.3 million over the past 7 years. None of these transactions appear on the financial disclosure Mr. Mazzanti provided to this court. The judge's expression hardened. "Mr. Calabrese, is your client aware he has an obligation to fully disclose all assets?" Walter leaned toward Vincent, whispering urgently. Vincent's face had gone pale. Rita continued, relentless. Exhibit C, account records from Banco Nacional de Panama showing an additional $1.7 million held in an account under the name Westchester Property Investments. Mr. Mazzani serves as president of this entity, though it appears to own no actual properties in Westchester or anywhere else. "This is a witch hunt," Walter exploded, half rising from his chair. "These are business accounts, separate from the marriage." "Sit down, Mr. Mazzanti," Judge Morrison commanded. "You'll have your opportunity to speak." Rita pulled out another document. Exhibit D, shell company formations in Delaware, Nevada, and Wyoming, all created during the marriage, all using marital funds for capitalization, all under Mr. Mazzanti's control. The total value of assets hidden in these structures exceeds $8 million. The courtroom went dead silent. Even the court reporter seemed to have stopped breathing. "Ms. Rogers," Judge Morrison said carefully, "how did you obtain these records? Foreign bank accounts are notoriously difficult to access." Rita's smile was thin and knowing. "Your Honor, I spent 30 years building relationships with international financial crimes units. When you've helped Interpol and the FBI recover billions in laundered money, certain doors remain open to you. I made some calls. People were cooperative. Walter looked like he might vomit. Vincent was frantically flipping through the documents, his professional composure crumbling with each page. These accounts, Rita said, her voice cutting through the chaos, represent deliberate, systematic concealment of marital assets. Mr. Matsani didn't just hide money from my daughter. He committed fraud against this court by failing to disclose them. And I'm just getting started. She pulled out another, much thicker folder. Shall we discuss the real estate holdings next? Or should we jump straight to the offshore trusts? Judge Morrison's patience had evaporated. Mr. Matsani, take the stand.
Now.
Walter stood slowly, his earlier swagger completely gone. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. As he walked to the witness stand, his hand trembled slightly when he placed it on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do, Walter said, his voice barely audible. Rita rose from her chair, like a panther uncoiling. She didn't rush to the podium. She walked slowly, deliberately, letting Walter sweat in the silence. Mr. Matsani, Rita began, her voice deceptively pleasant, you submitted a financial affidavit to this court dated October 15th, correct? Yes. And in that affidavit, you listed total assets of approximately $2.1 million. Is that correct? That's correct. Mr. Matsani, we've just established the existence of accounts containing over $8 million. Can you explain the discrepancy? Walter shifted in his seat. Those are business accounts. They're not personal assets. I see. So, when you used money from the joint account you shared with my daughter to capitalize MW Holdings, that was a business transaction. Yes. Rita held up a bank statement. Then, why does this wire transfer memo say, personal investment, WM? Walter's jaw tightened. That's just accounting language. Accounting language? Rita's eyebrows rose. Mr. Matsani, isn't it true that you systematically transferred marital assets into shell companies specifically to hide them from my daughter? No, that's not. Isn't it true that you've been preparing for this divorce for over 2 years, moving money where you thought she'd never find it? I was protecting my investments. From your wife, the woman you vowed to share your life with. Rita's voice was rising now, controlled fury bleeding through her professional demeanor. Or were you protecting your criminal enterprises? Objection. Vincent shouted. There's no evidence of criminal activity. Your Honor, Rita turned to the judge. I have documentation linking 3 of Mr. Matsani's shell companies to individuals currently under federal investigation for racketeering and fraud. Walter's face went crimson. You have no right to dig into my business. Your business. Rita whirled on him. The business you built with my daughter's inheritance? The money her father left her before he died? The money you convinced her to invest in your legitimate opportunities? That money was freely given, under false pretenses. You told her you were a real estate developer. You told her you were clean. You told her. Rita slammed a document on the witness stand rail. That you had no connections to organized crime. But this FBI intelligence report from 2019 says otherwise, doesn't it? Walter stood up, his face contorted with rage. You don't know who you're dealing with, lady. You think digging up some bank accounts makes you dangerous? I've buried better people than you. The courtroom went silent. Judge Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Matsani, are you threatening an officer of this court? Walter realized his mistake, but it was too late. The mask had slipped. The respectable businessman was gone, replaced by the thug underneath. I didn't mean. You didn't mean to reveal exactly who you are? Rita said quietly. Too late.
Oh, my God.
Did you just see Walter completely lose it on the stand? That's what happens when a mafia boss meets his match. If you're loving watching Rita dismantle this criminal piece by piece, smash that like button. Drop a comment and tell me what you think should happen to Walter next, and make sure you're subscribed because the next chapters are going to be insane. Rita's about to deliver the final blow, and trust me, you do not want to miss it. Let's go. Vincent Calabrese sat at the plaintiff's table, his expensive pen frozen midair above his legal pad. His face had gone from confident to concerned to absolutely terrified in the span of 15 minutes. He'd built his reputation defending difficult clients. Wealthy men in messy divorces. CEOs accused of affairs. Real estate moguls hiding assets. But this was something else entirely. This was criminal. Vincent's mind raced through the implications. Rita Rogers wasn't just exposing hidden assets. She was building a federal case in open court. Money laundering, wire fraud, racketeering. Every document she'd introduced wasn't just evidence for the divorce. It was evidence for an indictment. And he, Vincent Calabrese, was sitting right next to the defendant, his name attached to every motion, every filing, every denial of wrongdoing. Walter leaned toward him, his voice a harsh whisper. "Fix this. That's what I pay you for." Vincent didn't respond. He was too busy calculating his exit strategy. "Your Honor," Vincent said, standing abruptly. His voice had lost all its earlier bravado. "I need to request a brief recess to consult with my client." "Denied," Judge Morrison said flatly. "Ms. Rogers, continue." Vincent's hands trembled slightly as he sat back down. He looked at Walter with new eyes, not as a client, but as a liability. A massive, criminal, career-ending liability. "Vincent," Walter hissed. "What are you doing?" "Fight back. Fight back," Vincent whispered, his voice tight with panic. "Walter, do you understand what's happening here? She has documentation of federal crimes. Crimes I didn't know about when I agreed to represent you. Crimes you never disclosed to me. So what? You're my lawyer. That's privileged. Privilege doesn't cover ongoing criminal activity." Vincent shot back, keeping his voice low but urgent. "And it sure as hell doesn't protect me if I knowingly help you hide evidence of federal offenses. She's not just going after you, Walter. If I don't distance myself right now, I could be disbarred. Or worse, indicted as a co-conspirator." Walter's face twisted with rage. "You coward. I made you. One phone call, and your career is." "Your phone calls don't mean anything anymore," Vincent interrupted, something like relief breaking through his fear. "That's what you don't get. Rita Rogers just burned your entire operation to the ground. Your connections can't help you now. The only thing I can do is save myself." Vincent stood again. "Your Honor, I must respectfully move to withdraw as counsel for Mr. Mazzanti. Based on information revealed during these proceedings, I believe there may be conflicts of interest that prevent me from continuing this representation." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Walter grabbed Vincent's sleeve. "You can't abandon me. Not now." Vincent looked down at Walter's hand, then at Walter's face, and felt nothing but contempt. "Watch me." He yanked his arm free and began gathering his files. Walter Mazzanti sat alone at the plaintiff's table, abandoned by the last person he thought he could control. The predator had become the prey. Rita watched Vincent Calabrese flee the courtroom like a rat deserting a sinking ship. She allowed herself the smallest smile before turning back to Walter. "Your Honor," Rita said, "I have one final piece of evidence to present. This one is particularly relevant." She nodded to her associate, who wheeled forward a small television on a cart. The young attorney inserted a USB drive into the laptop connected to the screen. Walter's eyes went wide. "What is that? You can't just..." "This is a compilation of recorded conversations," Rita explained calmly. "Recorded with the full knowledge and consent of all parties involved. Perfectly legal under New York's one-party consent law." The screen flickered to life. The timestamp read March 2024. The video showed a restaurant interior, somewhere upscale in Manhattan. The camera was positioned low, perhaps from a phone propped on a table. Two men sat in the frame. One was Walter Mazzanti. The other was his accountant, David Breslin. "David's been very thorough about the Panama accounts." Walter's voice came through the speakers. "Nobody's going to find that money. Not Carmel, not the IRS, nobody." David's voice responded. What about the wire transfers? Those leave traces. That's why we use 3 different LLCs as cutouts. By the time anyone follows the paper trail, they'd need a federal warrant. And I've got enough people in my pocket that'll never happen. The courtroom was dead silent. Rita paused the video. This recording was made on March 7, 2024. 7 months before Mr. Matsani filed for divorce. 7 months before he submitted his fraudulent financial disclosure to this court. Walter's face had gone from red to white. Where did you get that? From someone who got tired of being complicit in your crimes, Rita said. She nodded to the back of the courtroom. The doors opened. David Breslin walked in, flanked by 2 men in suits that screamed federal agent. Walter's mouth fell open. David? You betrayed me? David didn't look at Walter. He kept his eyes forward as he walked to a seat in the gallery. Mr. Breslin, Rita continued, has been cooperating with federal investigators for the past 6 months. He's provided documentation of every illegal transaction, every fraudulent shell company, every laundered dollar. In exchange for immunity, he's agreed to testify against you in federal court. You're dead, Walter screamed, lunging toward David. 2 bailiffs immediately restrained him, forcing him back into his chair. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Mr. Matsani, control yourself. Rita pulled out one final document. Your Honor, I have here a sealed federal indictment that was issued this morning. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York is charging Walter Matsani with 12 counts of money laundering, 8 counts of wire fraud, and 6 counts of racketeering under the RICO Act. She handed the document to the bailiff, who verified the seal and court stamps. The only reason Mr. Matsani isn't already in federal custody, Rita continued, is because I asked the prosecutors to wait until these proceedings concluded. I wanted my daughter to see justice served in every arena where this man hurt her. Walter sat frozen, his empire crumbling around him in real time. Rita looked at him with cold satisfaction. You threatened my daughter. You stole from her. You tried to destroy her. But you made one critical mistake, Walter. She leaned forward slightly. You forgot that mothers protect their children, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes. And some mothers know exactly how to make monsters disappear. The late afternoon sun cast golden light through the tall windows of the Manhattan courthouse. It painted everything in warm amber. The marble floors, the oak benches, even the handcuffs that now bound Walter Matsani's wrists. 2 federal marshals led him toward the side exit, the one reserved for defendants being taken into custody. Walter's head hung low, his expensive suit rumpled, his face a mask of defeat and rage. As they passed Carmel, he turned his head. You'll regret this, he spat. You're nothing without me. You'll always be nothing. Carmel stood and looked him directly in the eyes. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. No, Walter. I was always something. You just convinced me I wasn't. But I'm my mother's daughter. And you should have remembered that before you underestimated us both. The marshals pulled Walter away. The heavy door closed behind him with a final, decisive thunk. Judge Morrison addressed the courtroom one last time. In light of the evidence presented today, I'm awarding Mrs. Matsani the full marital estate, including the Westchester property and all legitimate business assets. The fraudulent accounts will be seized by federal authorities. Mrs. Matsani, you're free to resume use of your maiden name if you choose. I do, Your Honor, Carmel said without hesitation. Carmel Rogers. Outside the courthouse, Carmel and Rita descended the stone steps together. The Manhattan sun felt warmer than it had in years. The air smelled like freedom. Thank you, Mom, Carmel said, her voice thick with emotion. I don't know how to. You don't have to thank me, Rita interrupted gently. That's what mothers do. We protect. We fight. We never give up on our children. Carmel stopped walking and turned to her mother. Why didn't you ever tell me? About your career, about who you really were? Rita smiled sadly. I wanted you to have a normal life. I didn't want you to know how dark the world could be. But when that darkness came for you anyway, she paused, her eyes fierce. I made sure it learned why it should have stayed away from my daughter. They stood together on the courthouse steps, mother and daughter, two women who had just defeated a monster. Carmel looked up at the sky, feeling truly free for the first time in years. No more fear. No more control. No more Matsanti. What do we do now?
Carmel asked.
Rita linked her arm through her daughter's. Now we go home. We rebuild. And we live the life you deserve. The one you always deserved. As they walked away from the courthouse, neither woman looked back. Behind them, in a secure transport vehicle, Walter Matsandi was beginning a journey to a federal detention center. The Mafia boss who thought he was untouchable had learned a simple truth: never underestimate a mother's love. And never, ever cross Rita Rogers.
That was
Epic. If you made it to the end of this insane courtroom takedown, you have to hit that like button right now. I need to know in the comments, what was your favorite moment? Was it Rita's entrance? Walter's breakdown? David betraying him? Let me know below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Subscribe now so you never miss another incredible story like this one. Justice was served today, and I'm so glad you were here to witness it. Until next time, remember, never underestimate the power of a mother protecting her child.
peace.